Well, Sheikh Imranon Hossein, what we're witnessing is foreign intervention in Syria and Iraq. And anything else that goes on in the world is blamed on ISIS as well. I mean, Paris. I don't know. Can you give us an understanding of what is unfolding in front of us now?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Maris, the perspective that I bring to the discussion is that of eschatology. There are others who are political scientists, experts in military affairs, security, and so on, and mine is eschatology. And our perspective is that these events are unfolding in a certain pattern, which are all pointing towards another very big war. But the Judeo-Christian Zionist alliance, which has NATO as its military arm, are targeting Russia, and to the extent that China is allied with Russia, targeting China as well, in order to force their submission to the diktat of the Zionist rulers of the world. This has been a view which has been contested by many who consider nuclear war to be something not likely to take place. But yes, there can be wars, and we've already been having wars in the past, but not a nuclear war. Because in their opinion, nuclear war will be the end of the world, that there'll be no life after that in the world. We are of the opinion that not only will the nuclear war take place, and not only will there be great damage in the world, great destruction in the world, but that there is life in the world after nuclear war. Because the eschatological plan was for a ruling state to emerge in Pax Britannica, to be succeeded by a second ruling state, that is Pax Americana, and that there must be a third and a last ruling state, which would be Pax Judaica. Of course, the word Pax is a misnomer because it represents peace. But Pax Britannica and Pax Americana and Pax Judaica are not at all about peace, but about war and about lies. Our perspective is that Israel cannot rule the world when Israel is so small and the world is so big. Either that Israel must expand dramatically its territorial frontiers, or that the world must become smaller, must contract. And our view is that it is the second one, the second of the two possibilities that is now going to take place. That is, the world is going to become much smaller. The rump of the world, which will be left after nuclear war, would be manageable for Israel to establish her rule over the world. The second matter that we recognize from our Islamic eschatological perspective is that on the road that they are marching to eventual war with Russia, nuclear war, they are using every trick in the book to make it appear that they are themselves innocent, that they are not seeking war, and they want to put the blame on others. And they do so through something which is now recognized as a false flag, an act of terrorism, which they themselves plan and execute, and then put the blame for it on others. We become familiar with false flags. They used to happen more rarely, but since 9/11, they now are taking place very frequently. There was one in France called Charlie Hebdo, and then there was a second one that just occurred recently. And our Islamic eschatological perspective, which I assume will not differ from that of other Abrahamic religions, is that the universe is constructed as a moral order, and that events cannot occur without consequences, because there is an intelligent God, there is a just God who is ruling over the world, and he knows all things. And the consequence that emerges from the Quran of false flag terrorism is that one day these false flags are going to come home to roost. And that is that those who are attempting to deceive mankind by committing acts of terrorism and then putting the blame on others will themselves eventually be deceived. And justice will be done on that day when they will say, well, we didn't do it. Horrendous acts of terrorism that are still to come. But at that time, mankind will blame them for it, because they have paved the way for it with all their false flag acts of terrorism and their deception. And therefore those who today are seeking to deceive will eventually themselves be deceived.
I wish the likes of Russia would call out these false flags or hoaxes, but they do not. Why does Russia hold back and not reveal the truth as you do?
I cannot answer that question. I am not privy to the thinking of the Russian government. No, I am not privy to that. But I do admire the fact that by and large, in the events which have been unfolding of late, we do not see evidence of the Russian government telling lies. No. We do not see such evidence now. There may have been false flags in the past, yes. There may have been deliberate deception and lies in the past. But we seem to be now living in an era in which the Russian government is being more circumspect and are not telling lies. This is something that we can welcome, because if you speak the truth, eventually people are going to respect you for it.
I think they are winning hearts and minds. You know, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, the British Parliament voted to bomb in Syria, and they did immediately, hours later. And I'm British. I fail to understand what Britain's concern is to bomb these people, particularly if you consider this area has been bombed by Western forces for decades, long before ISIS ever appeared.
Well, there is a significant difference between the policy of the Russian government and that of the Western Zionist powers. The Russian government received a request from the Syrian government and acted on the basis of that request and responded. The Russian government went to the Russian parliament for a vote to accept the Syrian request for assistance. And so in terms of international law, Russia is in Syria on the basis of law. The British government has no basis of law for entering into the territory of Syria and committing acts that are military in nature. They do not have the permission of the Syrian government. No. They are acting as outlaws. They are in violation of international law. But they don't care. They make the law and they change the law. They establish the law and then they violate the law. They said that they are establishing a monetary system which will have some semblance of integrity, and that the US dollar would be redeemable in gold at the rate of $35 an ounce. This is international law that they established. It's there in the Articles of Agreement of the International Monetary Fund. And the same people who established the law are the same ones who repudiated the law and tore it up. They said, we gave our word, but we don't have to keep our word. And this is their modus operandi. They are bandits. They are people with no moral principles at all. And they are the ones, therefore, who are setting a bad example, while Russia is seeking to conform to the standard of law in all things. A world of difference between the two.
You know, I concentrate on geopolitics, but I also take issue with what we call false flags, and many of them are hoaxes. Many of them never really happen. They always seem to coincide with a drill that is going on. San Bernardino had a drill just yesterday. There was a mass shooting. There was a drill in Kenya last week, and people died, and they just didn't warn the people that there was a drill going on at the same time. But people seem very reluctant to call these hoaxes at times when, in fact, they're just crisis actors. They're just paid mercenaries giving false testimony.
This is a repetition. History is repeating itself. There's a reenactment now of an epic encounter which occurred thousands of years ago. And history is now repeating itself. In the same way that there were those who were scared of Pharaoh. They were afraid of him. They were terrified of him. They feared his punishment. They feared his anger. So too today there are those who know the truth, but are too scared to recognize it and proclaim it. There are those who find it to be more convenient to simply uncritically absorb whatever is being dished out to them in the media, because the alternative would be a life too difficult for them to live. These are a people who have a status equivalent to cattle. And then there are others who say, we cannot continue to make money. We cannot continue to prosper. We cannot continue to advance in our work if we stand up against those who are ruling the world. Yes, we recognize that there is deception and there are lies, but we have to put our tail between our legs and we have to ignore all of these things and be politically correct in our conduct. And so there are people who betray themselves and betray their religion, yes, and adopt a way of life that is suitable for them to be able to live in the world and to prosper in the world. These are people who betray. Finally, there are those who have integrity. There are people who choose to live with integrity, and it matters not to them if life becomes difficult, if life becomes dangerous. What is more important to them is to live as a man with freedom than to be a slave. Malcolm X was such a person. And these are the people who are immortal. They will occupy the pages of history, while others remain mere footnotes on the pages of history. You and I, Daniel, Morris, and our listening audience, our viewing audience, we must have in our hearts this firm desire that we want to be people of integrity, that we want to uphold the truth, regardless of the price that we may have to pay.
Well, we live in a world where we're all slaves to the money printers. So it really is an act of defiance and a sacrifice to disobey them. I mean, by and large, so many people are saying things strictly because they're on wages to say them. It's a frightening world. I mean, I'm thinking of journalists.
Maurice, I have the perception that more and more people in Western civilization are now waking up. In fact, they show more signs of waking up than in our Islamic civilization. And that more and more people in the West are going to stand up firmly and declare themselves to be people who denounce injustice and oppression. Yes. And our duty is to come together, that we must form friendship and alliance with each other in order to combat a common enemy, the enemy who is an oppressor and who is telling monstrous lies. So these interviews that you are conducting with me, as they reach many, many people who I have never met, our hearts should now begin to bind together. And we must be friendly towards each other, and we must build friendship and solidarity amongst ourselves, no matter whatever religion we belong to, and no matter where we may be located. Many of them would be in the Western world, speaking the English language that I am now speaking, and come together to build a common front in opposition to oppression and to lies, and to recognize that the biggest oppressor state in the world today is the state of Israel.
You know, I would like to ask you, if I may change the subject, why did Turkey shoot down a Russian plane? What did they hope to gain from it? What could have been their reason for doing it?
There is a straight line which connects the Ottoman Empire with the state of Turkey. The Ottoman Empire and the state of Turkey have both pursued basically the same policy of hostility towards Russia and hostility towards Orthodox Christianity, while establishing friendly relations and maintaining solidarity with Western Christianity and with the Jews. Turkey has acted in a manner consistent with Turkish policy and consistent with Ottoman policy in being hostile to Russia. It is the large-heartedness of the Russian government. It is the simplicity and integrity and wondrous personality of the Russian leader that they took Turkish hand in friendship and sincerely sought to build a positive relationship with Turkey. Despite 500-600 years of undisguised Ottoman oppression and war, on Russia, despite the fact that Turkey, thanks to Stalin, who was a friend of the Zionists, that Turkey chose to join NATO. And Turkey is a member of NATO, despite the fact that Turkey is in control of the Bosphorus and the Straits of Dardanelles, which allows Turkey to have a stranglehold on Russia's neck. Despite all of these things, Russia reached out to Turkey. And we say to Russia that we congratulate you for having adopted that policy, because it shows you to be a people with good intentions, with good hearts. And now that that policy has failed, because the Turkish leopard will not change its spots, it is now clear that Turkey was acting on the basis of deception rather than sincerity. For example, the South Stream, the pipelines. It is now causing Russia an enormous loss of money to have to stop that pipeline. I don't think Turkey is at all sincere. I think that project is now scrapped, finished, and there's no future for it. The Turkish act of bringing down the aircraft was also meant to try to get Russia to overreact and to build a basis for war, because the Turks are lusting for war. They want to recreate the Ottoman Empire, Neo-Ottomanism. They have the most powerful military force in that entire region. The only power in that region anyway comparable to them would be Israel, nothing else. No one can stand in their way if war begins. And they're just lusting to take over Syria and take over Iraq as they did when the Ottoman Empire existed. And when they take over these territories, it'll become a much safer world for Israel. They want war. That's what they want. And they brought down the aircraft in order to be able to try to provoke Russia. The next reason why they brought down the aircraft was that Putin's profile was growing too strong, too high in the world. Putin was beginning to look good. He was scoring victory over victory. Yes, he made a successful military intervention in Syria, and they couldn't stop him. He has ISIS running, and they can't stop him. So what they did was to try to make Putin look bad, to bring down the aircraft, and to ensure that Putin cannot respond to them other than with war. Russia is now in a fix. Russia has not been able to respond except with some economic sanctions, but that by itself is not enough. If Russian public opinion is to be appeased, what Russia needs to do is to try to win the battle for public opinion within Russia, that we will not escalate the situation at this time. No, we will accept the loss of our aircraft. We'll accept the loss of 2 of our personnel. We'll accept it. We are prepared to accept further losses, but we want to project an image to the world of a people who prefer peace to war, so that when the provocations keep on recurring, it becomes more and more clear to the world who are those who prefer war to peace, who are the provocators, who are the ones who want war. That's what the Russian policy should be.
You know, when you look at the Middle East, in Syria in particular, one gets the feeling that the war's objectives are to empty the country of people, You could equally say to flatten the country, to create a failed state. But just to focus on the mass exodus of people, it would appear to be a war aim.
Our eschatology tells us that their objective is that they want to take control of Syria. Military control, political control. They establish their political dominion over Syria. Because if they do so, they'll be able to control Lebanon. And control over Syria and Lebanon would make it easier for Israel to wage the big war that Israel must wage in order to expand its territorial frontiers to encompass the biblical frontiers of the Holy Land. Dajjal, the false Messiah, cannot make the claim to be the true Messiah and expect any Jew to accept him as the Messiah if Israel does not expand to encompass the biblical frontiers of the Holy Land. The Quran gives us evidence which makes it clear that those territorial frontiers are false. Someone rewrote the Bible to give those false territorial frontiers. Israel has to wage a big war. We've known that for a long, long time now. And in order for Israel to wage that big war and for it to be a piece of cake for Israel, it would be beneficial for NATO to take control of Libya and for NATO to take control of Syria and Lebanon. It's as simple as that. So it doesn't matter to them if all of Syria has to become refugees. They don't care for that. They don't care for people. What they want is to win their goal of taking control of Syria.
Sheikh Imran, I'm not sure of what more to ask you. It's been a tremendous education from you. Is there something you'd like to add? Perhaps I did not inquire?
Yes, of course. Our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, has informed us that there's going to be this great war. And that in this great war, 99 out of every 100 who fight in the war will be killed. Conventional war has never killed 99% of combatants. This has never occurred in history. And so there is a war which is coming which will be unlike any other war that mankind has ever known. We say it's going to be nuclear war, war with the use of weapons of mass destruction. Only that kind of war can kill 99% of combatants. Those who are listening to this interview must be aware, must be made aware, this is our duty to them, that such a war is going to disrupt food supplies and supply of water and energy. And if you are living in the big cities of the world, you will be facing a state of anarchy. That is for the remnant of mankind that survived the war. And so you should be preparing to leave the big cities and move to the countryside. Number two, that we should all, out of concern for our own selves and for our wives and children, we should all be stocking up on food and on water and on energy such as candles and so on. My guess would be safe for about 3 months. Food, I just went myself a few days ago and started buying canned food, which can be preserved for some time. So preserve food which can be preserved. And that we should make a difference between water which is to be drunk, drinking water, and water for cooking, from water to be used otherwise, like washing dishes and so on, in the toilet and so on. And keep the drinking water preserved in glass bottles rather than plastic. We don't know what's going to happen when nuclear war takes place. what would nuclear radiation do to plastic? It is more likely that glass bottles might survive, and our water will still be there. Smaller bottles rather than bigger bottles. So if a bottle breaks, you won't lose 10, 15, 20 gallons of water. And that your drinking water in particular should be preserved in a place where falling debris from buildings falling and so on would not damage the bottles and break them. That we should also stock up on food and water and be able to at least survive for, I say, 3 months in the event of nuclear war. I was thinking that perhaps the war may take place in another year or so from now. But I want to warn that it may be earlier than that. It may be earlier than that. When we make these predictions, we always hope that we are wrong. We are happy when we are wrong. But to be fair to those who are listening to us and who have some respect for our judgment, we have to warn that it's possible that the war can be earlier than a year from now. What happens after nuclear war is important. It's not just a question of survival of nuclear war. It's about events which will follow the nuclear war. And Maurice, through your interviews, I've been able to alert people who otherwise would not have known it, that Islamic eschatology has informed us about the conquest of Constantinople, which will follow the Great War. It is true that Christian eschatology also has the conquest of Constantinople, but not as firmly as it is located in Islamic eschatology. If the conquest of Constantinople is to take place, there is going to be civil war in Turkey. The conquest of Constantinople cannot take place without civil war in Turkey. And so our policy should be adjusted, particularly Russia, should be adjusted in such a way that you do not antagonize all public opinion in Turkey. No. That you try to win over the public opinion in Turkey, which is anti-NATO. I have been trying to alert the Russian government to this. I don't know when I'm going to see policies from the Russian government which are specifically designed not to antagonize the entire public opinion in Turkey and bring Turkish nationalism to the fore, taking hold of all the Turkish people, but rather to design your policies in such a way that you're able to reach out to that part of the population of Turkey which is anti-NATO, because the conquest of Constantinople is now very clearly visible in sight after the Turkish shooting down of the Russian aircraft.
I hear voices of moderation from Russia, not putting all the Turkish people as enemies, which is similar to what you're saying. Sheikh Imran, shall we stop there?
Thank you, Maurice. I'm glad for this chance to be able to share my views through you to all your viewing audience.
Well, we're thrilled and delighted. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, Maurice.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.